So this is my Lexus GS450H 2007. You can see I've got the dash warning lights, check hybrid system, and then it also gives me a couple of check VBCs and check EBC, I think it calls it as well. And you'll see I've got the engine warning light, and you can probably also hear in the back of the car the fan is running. So that is the fan for the battery hybrid. When that's running, that's another indication that you've got hybrid battery problems, as is this one here, where you can see you've got no flow going in any of the directions. Now normally you get a flow whether the battery's being charged by the wheels or the electric motor or the engine or however it's working at the time, and you've got no flow here either, which confirms this problem. Now we've had this problem before when we first got the car and had to get the hybrid battery out of the boot and replace some of the cells because some of the cells were below the required voltage, and that's exactly what we're going to do again today, because the car won't run for very long with the hybrid problems that you're seeing there. It will only run for, well, you can get maybe 10 minutes if you're lucky. Sometimes you don't get more than a minute, so it just depends really. Apologies for the wind, it's quite a blustery day today, which is great. But the first job that we've got to do is get to the hybrid battery, which is behind this piece here, and to do that we have to start by taking all the carpeting out. We will also get to the standard 12-volt battery behind here and disconnect that. Now, a word of warning before we start disconnecting things. The electrical system, which you can just about start to see there on the hybrid, is always marked with orange cables or connectors. It can be a high voltage system, so you need to make sure that you are disconnected the proper way, and as long as you're sensible with the electrics, i.e. have the battery disconnected first and logical things like that, and don't go putting your fingers on terminals, then you should be fine. So to remove the trim holding the back piece of carpet in, stick a small screwdriver through the loop at the top and pull away. To remove the anchor points, you pull up the plastic cover and undo the 10mm bolt. These are the plastic hooks that live underneath the top of the bonnet, and to get them off you just need to push both of these side buttons in to release them. The boot carpet out, and you can see that's the hybrid battery all along there, 40 cells all lined up in series, which is probably part of the reason the battery fails, because they're all dependent on each other. On top is the fan and the various ducting that then comes round to here. So the next job is to remove the orange circuit breaker for the battery, which my assistant's going to do now. So you pull the handle to one side and then pull it out to the right. And then the next thing we're going to do is remove the ducting. Now the black plastic rivet there, and now I'm just doing this one here. Okay, so with both of the rivets off, we're going to pull out the ducting. This is the fan removal. We're going to disconnect the connector for the fan and then undo those two bolts. This is the fan and the associated ducting removed. This is the fan and ducting removed when the battery is still in situ. So the next thing we're going to do is disconnect that black cable and also disconnect the cover, allowing access to the orange cables. So to undo this, use a pair of long nose and stick one in there and the other end to push it round, rotate it, and then hopefully pull it out. So we mark these up top and bottom so we know which one goes where, and we're just going to wrap them up with insulation tape as a precautionary measure. You don't necessarily need to, but it's just to be on the safe side. When that's done, we need to remove these two bits of ducting. You'll have to remove the black pop rivet that was in there for this one. And we need to remove the battery tray to get the piece of ducting out that disappears into the wing there. The step's going to be to remove these two large bolts either side and to disconnect the casing from the car body from this side. Now we're into the inside of the car. So to start getting access to the back, you need to raise the rear headrests and remove the plastic cover that will reveal access to a bolt. So when you've taken those two bolts out, you should then be able to pull the seat forward slightly, and hopefully you can get to this piece of soundproofing. This isn't easy. And then pull that out the way. There's a black cover which will come off, and that will then allow you access to the bolts underneath that you need to release the battery. When you've done that, you need to lift up this fabric that sits behind the bulkhead and the back seat, and then find these little black flappy plastic covers and lift those up, take them off. You should be able to see a bolt behind it that needs removing. This is a better view of the nuts you need to remove. It's the bigger nut, this one here, that you need to remove, not these two. So we're now almost at the point of lifting the battery up, and you have to lift it up to get it over these studs and then get it onto the boot floor. I'm going to put something down to protect the boot floor, but we're also just going to check that everything else is disconnected from the battery itself. So cables like this we're now going to disconnect. Once you've lifted the battery off the studs and pulled it forward in the boot, it should look something like this. You have this white piece of tubing to connect here, disconnect here. Other than that, everything else should be freed up. Then we need to look at removing the casing nuts so we can get to the row of cells underneath and find out which one's dud. So this is just removing the black ducting on the side of the casing to be able to lift the top off and get to the cells. To go around the casing, removing the nuts that go through the studs, and then in this instance also got another one of these orange connectors to come off. So if you do find yourself needing to replace one of these battery cells, you have to undo these large rods here at either end, and then if you look underneath, you also have to remove this plate with these two as well. If you look underneath, you'll see there's a whole row of nuts there, and you can't just take out one cell and replace it. You have to take out all the cells up to it. So if your cell that's broken is this one, then you'll have to take out all of these to get to that. You can't just unbolt this one and slot it out. So we've gone through checking all the cells and only found 0.05 volts of a variance, which is a bit of a strange one. So we're hoping it's just the fact that the copper washers were corroded. As you can see, we've tried to clean them all up again. Did this when we refurbished it last year as well, but it seems to have got quite corroded again already. And then put dielectric grease on everything and tightened it all up again, and hopefully that's going to fix any potential issues that were brewing. So these are two of the batteries we'd removed previously. One is our good spare and one is our bad battery that we removed when we first had the fault about a year ago. I'm going to just check the voltage across the battery so you can see. Each battery has a minus and a plus, or a positive and negative, and they are in the actual battery cradle back to front, so they go plus minus throughout the entire run of the batteries. If we check the voltage over this battery, you can see it's 7.51, so that's our good battery. We know that's the one that's our good spare. Over this one, this is 6.3. Now from memory you need to be pulling a voltage of around 6.7 for it to be a good battery. So if you do need to replace the battery cells, be aware that there are wired temperature sensors under the cells which you need to be careful of. So when you finish working on the battery and you got it back in the car, installing it is basically the reverse of taking it out. These are some of the images you should be seeing once you've managed to successfully repair your battery and replace it back in the car.